He went to go get, because the first people up on the agenda are Noe Hinojosa and Estrada Hinojosa, and they're in Helen's office. Is Mr. Martinez not coming today? Oh, he's not coming. Do you have a paper copy of the agenda?
Are you? Nice.
Hi, good afternoon. Mr. Chairman, we're ready? 5:30.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Notice of a public meeting of the Charter Review Committee of the City of Brownsville will conduct a regular meeting on Wednesday, November 30, 2022 at 5:30 p.m. at the City Commission Chambers of the Brownsville City Hall. Members of the public who submitted a public comment form will be permitted to offer public comments as provided by the agenda and as permitted by the presiding officer during the meeting. It is 5:31. Mr. Chair, you may call the meeting to order.
And now call the meeting order. I believe we go through our,
Next item, we have invocation. Please stand. Mr. Mayor, would you like?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Okay. So the first item on the agenda that we have is presentations. And the presentation that we're going to have tonight is the presentation by Noe Hinojosa, Estrada Hinojosa and Company Incorporated. And it's related to the BPUB Fitch ratings and the correlation, if any, to proposed changes to City of Brownsville's charter. And just for everybody's reference, we're going to go ahead and put up this on the agenda or on the screen here regarding the Fitch rates. So Mr. Hinojosa, the floor is all yours.
Well, thank you. Good evening, Noe Hinojosa, for the record, the Estrada Hinojosa and Company. Good to see familiar faces. Judge Coscos, how you doing? David, good to see you. It's been a long time. And new faces. I guess I've been city as financial advisor. I happen to run a broker-dealer house in Dallas that dedicates itself to public finance. Been doing it now 30 years, going on our 31st year. Both my partner, Bob Estrada, and myself are from Brownsville. So one of our first contracts was coming before you guys and before the city commission and getting appointed as their financial advisor. And it's been a lot of fun since. So I commend you and I thank you in advance for having taken this job of being on the Charter Review Committee, and hopefully we can have some fun tonight. I think the item reads about the negative outlook from Fitch as it relates to recent developments over by the utility company. You have had that rating report. I'm trying to get my guys to share with me, and I don't know, Victor, or is it Will? Where's Will? I just sent you that, so, perfect. So I was going to take you to page 1 of this little spreadsheet that we normally share with our PUB. We happen to be the PUB's financial advisor too. And basically, in global terms, the utility system of PUB has about 12 loans that are currently outstanding. And think of those loans, those bond issues, as you have in mortgages. So you have 12 properties, 12 assets that you have financed over time. And currently, the PUB system has about $290 million. So when you hear about a rating agency, and I don't want to be condescending or patronizing, some of you may know about rating agencies, some of you may not know. So I'm just trying to be very much into a public finance 101. And if you feel like I'm being too descriptive, please don't hesitate, stop me and ask a question, or if I'm not being descriptive enough, do the same too. So basically, with these 12 loans that the PUB has, there's about $290 million worth of bonds outstanding. It doesn't mean that that's the only debt the PUB has outstanding. We also have commercial paper program out there, which is sort of like a credit card that we use from time to time to fund certain projects and then take them out with doing a bond financing over the long haul, over long term, and that adds up to the 290. Currently, Mike, we have what, about $10 million in CP outstanding? No. Nothing. So basically, as we speak, all we have is $290 million of debt outstanding. That debt is paid back over a period of, I guess from now to 2022 to 2051. So you're out there almost 29 years. The beauty about the debt is rapidly being paid between now and 2031. So literally after 2031, the debt really drops. So when Fitch or Moody's or Standard & Poor's give an opinion on your ratings, both the city and PUB, it affects the value of that bond issue in the secondary markets. So think of you lending me money and my rating or my credit quality drops. In order for you to be able to get liquidity for that bond in the secondary market, if you bought it at a AA credit and now it's a single A or a triple B, that credit is now riskier. So it's going to be more expensive to sell. So when we go to the market and borrow money, we want to make sure that the investor has always been treated right. So what Fitch said on the rating report was, we're going to give you a negative outlook. Guess we could go to page 1. Right there, thank you. So on that report, you'll see the ratings at the very top. Moody's is AA3, AA S&P. That's City of Brownsville's ratings. Brownsville PUB, it's an A2 stable by Moody's again, A- by S&P, and A+ by Fitch with a negative outlook. So when anything goes off the radar that is not your customary behavior by a client, by a credit, the rating agencies get a little nervous. And what I mean by that being stable behavior is that when you have a forensic audit, when you have somewhat of an apparent hysteria out there, people start asking. And then the questions when they get asked is how stable is management, how stable is the board, how stable is everything that you're doing. Most importantly, what is the commission in this particular case? How is it supporting the PUB board? The city commission historically has only had 3 powers: appoint board members, set rates, and issue bonds for its board. The board is supposed to manage the utility. The board, when it feels like they need to go out and do a capital project, comes to the commission with a recommendation and says, I need you to help me issue these bonds to fund a capital project, or help me bring up rates so that I can support at some future rate, that at some future date, the issuance of that bond. You're probably familiar, some of you, with general obligation bonds, with certificates of obligation. Those get paid by property taxes. When you sell a revenue bond for the benefit of a utility, whether it's sales tax revenue bonds, whether it's utility revenue bonds, you gotta have revenues 12 months before you sell them. So if you have $300 million worth of debt outstanding, the requirement on that, if you go to page 2, the requirement on that, it's going to be about $30 million a year. So basically, this is the way the debt, all this 12 loans or 13 loans that the PB has outstanding, that's how they're being paid off right now. So as these bonds get paid off, you got to generate surplus revenues to cover this debt. So we have what is called this flow of funds and how we pay that debt service. And if you look at that page very specifically, look at the fourth row from the top to the bottom, you see the word coverage. In 2021, we covered that debt 6.25 times, or PB did for that matter. And then in 2020, the year prior, we were at 294. In 19, we were at 316. In 2022, we suspect we have coverage of what, 2.25 times maybe? It's gonna be about 2.25, 2.5 times. Why? Because we didn't have the benefit of selling a lot of electricity in 21 due to that big storm that we had back in February of 21. So when the coverage drops to normal levels, that's fine. If you look at the rating report, it specifically talks about how the commission has accelerated the reduction of the rate that was allocated for the Tenasca project. When you accelerate that, that means you're going to generate less revenues. So that's going to affect your coverage. So as you go about lending money to either the city of Brownsville or any of its enterprises as a bondholder, you're exposed to potentially having a credit that is lowered. I'm not too much worried about the Fitch downgrade, because the Fitch downgrade from a AA minus is going to get to, from an A plus, it's going to get down to even A, if it gets downgraded. But if you look at S&P, they're an A minus. If you look at Moody's, that's an A2. If S&P reacts to what Fitch you said, they said they downgrade you. Now, negative outlook doesn't mean that you're going to be downgraded automatically the following year. Downgrades in ratings don't occur from one day to the next. They occur over time. Ratings get downgraded based on trends, based on behavior, based on results. So what's come to our attention is that if you read at the Fitch rating report, there's another component that they're nervous about, and that is that the commission accelerated the rate reduction or the rate increase, they accelerated the fact that they want to take out what would have been the rate increase to Tenasca. We were going to do it over a period of 2 years. Now it's a period of 1.5 years. So they're concerned the impact of those revenues on coverages, coupled with the fact that there's talk about governance, that maybe the city commission is going to get more involved in the either appointment, reappointment of board members, and how quickly they can remove those board members, and so on and so forth. So when you look at the fundamentals of credit ratings, there are only two components on fundamentals: your ability to pay, your willingness to pay. Ability is getting sacrificed some by virtue of the fact that you learn revenues or for reasons that you and I know had to do with bringing down rates because you don't need those revenues to do the borrowing that you intended to do 7 or 8 years ago. But in their eyes, if I'm a lender and I have all those revenues being generated by my client or my credit, they want everything to be left alone. Well, I'm sorry, this is public finance. You have issues, and we have them all the time. So the commission's opted to say, hey, we're going to reduce these rates, and it is what it is. We think, as your advisors, the advisors of the PB, that the best time to do that is today when as an entity, the PB has the strongest financial balance sheet. We've never had the strongest balance sheet as PB has today. That's a good thing. The bad thing, what makes it bad, is that in today's market conditions, if you were to borrow money, as you're creating stability in your credit ratings, there is a spread between a double A credit, a single A credit. Time we borrow money of the MMD, there's an index, and based on your ratings, we will
influence or changing in the way the management of PUB is conducted. So if we do anything to change any of that, the likelihood is that it's going to change our bond ratings.
That's what they said.
Right, exactly,
I
I know.
don't believe.
You're the messenger, I understand.
Yeah, I'm the messenger, but I don't believe, and I don't agree with them. I think this is public finance. This is not finance.
Yeah.
Public, when you get the public involved, you may say one thing, I'll say another thing. At the end of the day, you're going to judge me as a rating analyst on the results of my approach versus his approach. The fact that this commission, if the commission were to say, we want the commissioners to be the board members, that's the prerogative of a democratic process, right? They got elected, they can put themselves in there. Yes, it's going to create an aura of trust and will these guys do the right thing or gals? At the end of the day, results will speak louder than words.
What I'm really trying to avoid is having any member of either the PUB board, PUB administration, or even the city commission or city administration say, no, we don't want to do that because it's going to impact our bonds.
Well,
That's what I'm concerned about. Then,
and
and
that's
if that's the case, then we're wasting our time.
that's a legitimate concern because you're an A-rated credit. If you change anything, it's going to make them nervous. Now, do you have the right to change? You have the right to do whatever you want to do. I'm not going to tell you here that it will not affect the ratings, nor can I tell you that it will not.
Right.
Because a lot of these ratings are opinions, and they're opinions based on market standards. If I take you to another client of ours, San Antonio Electric and Gas, I have a report here that of the top 25 cities, there are only 6, the top 25 cities in Texas, only 6 of them have independent boards. One of them is San Antonio. They have a CPS, happens to be a client of ours. San Antonio Water System is another client of ours. They get appointed by the city council. They actually are independent from the city council, and they're there to do exactly the same things that we do here. When we did the master restructuring back in '05, we did it actually as a carbon copy to the bond ordinance of CPS and SAWS, except that they're transferring 14% of adjusted gross revenues. Here, we're transferring 10%. So San Antonio, like Brownsville, through its history, has had its issues with management, with, meaning the board. You know, the board in CPS, I think, is 4 and the mayor, and at SAWS is 6 and the mayor, I think. And from time to time, they'll have issues like the ones we're having here, and that you're not giving me enough money, blah, 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 blah. Prior to '05, before we did the master restructuring, the transfers from PUB to the city were very inconsistent. One year they'll get 2.5 million, another year 3, another 1.5 million. If you needed a rate increase for PUB, I'll give you 2. If you give me the ability to sell bonds, I'll give you 3.
No, that is very similar to what Cameron County goes through with their bridge system.
Well, you said it.
Yeah, no, it is. I
You
mean,
know.
the bridge system is a cash cow, right? So anytime, the county need more money, they would transfer more from the bridge system. But let me go back. So in your opinion, if one of the items that gets to the vote of the voter says that the city commission must ratify the PUB budget or must ratify the administration's level of compensation or whatever. Let's say, I'm using hypotheticals and I don't like dealing in hypotheticals.
Please.
Let's say that we do that. How and why would that have or possibly have an impact on our bond ratings? If all we're doing is having the city ratify PUB's budget on an annual basis, because part of the complaint, all this stuff that's going on, I don't want to deal with Tenasca because that's got nothing to do with all of this, but
Yeah.
that the city did not have enough oversight over PUB. You had the tail wagging the dog, basically. And so now if we try to do that to where the city commission does have more impact, I don't see how that would impact the bonds, interest rates, or the issuance of these bonds. All these are revenue bonds. I just don't see how changing a governance model is going to impact forget the financial side, but how is it going to impact the revenue side from PUB? Because we decide to, we put it out to the voter to change how it's governed. I don't see that. I mean, I don't see how they match up.
It's hard to disagree with you. I think those are very fair comments. I can't control what they will say because it's an unusual practice in the type of independent boards that are out there. I think ratifying a budget, in fact, I think Mr. Perez or Finance Office already comes to, from time to time, it comes to the City Commission, right? And don't you give an update or not? Times. There are times, depending on what's out there, the staff will come.
Yeah, but that's done simply on as a courtesy.
Exactly.
Okay, and I'm speaking to the fact that the city must ratify the PUB budget. That way they cannot claim that they have no oversight, because they do have some oversight. I think they need to have some oversight in ratifying, top administrative salaries.
Yeah.
You know,
And I've been with the city, I've had the privilege of serving the city 32, 33 years.
since you were like 12, right?
Thank you. Well, I'm getting there. But there's always been an issue of communication. If I talk to PUB, they're talking, we don't understand where the city is coming from. I talk to the city, we don't understand where PUB is coming from. And I'm thinking that maybe the charter should say that both bodies should at least meet once a year. Because the way it's set up right now, the mayor is the ex officio. But, the mayor, and I've had the privilege of knowing all those mayors going back to Nacho Garza, I think. And the mayor doesn't have time to come and brief every commissioner. He has to do it in a public meeting. So I would suggest back then, when Henry Gonzalez was mayor, to have joint meetings with PUB. So we would call on PUB and we'll have joint meetings. Why are you investing in the Duke plant? Why do we need to do a $60 million loan? So that people have a better understanding of what's going on over there. Right now, it's up to one mayor to tell the story to the commission. So that's not fair to them, because out there, I can tell you, working with them, even with the previous manager, or with John Brucia for that matter, I always felt that if I asked a question, I will get the best answer that they knew how. And that's just my experience with them.
But no, as you know, that there's nothing that prohibits any member of the public or the city commission from attending PUB board meetings.
That's right.
Or a PUB board member attending city commission meetings. Where the disconnect, I believe, is and has been, is the fact that neither party can be privy to executive sessions without the consent of their corresponding attorney. In other words, a city commissioner can't go and say, hey, I want to read, we talked about this, I want to read the executive session minutes. And I think Mike or maybe Victor said something, well, yeah, they can ask, like any member of the public can ask, but it's got to be cleared through their legal. See, so I agree that they have the ability to have joint meetings, but they're not privy to each other's executive sessions. And I think that they probably should be.
Well,
So no, let me
yes, ma'am.
interrupt. I want to make sure that I'm understanding this right. So from the Fitch article, and I'm going to read this, factors that could individually or collectively lead to negative rating or rating action or downgrade. And one of those listed is policy changes at PUB that limit the utility's independent decision-making ability, including rate-setting ability and utility operations. So from this and from what you're saying, it sounds like any move towards decreasing PUB's independence would mean that, the ratings could, they would be at risk, right?
Yes.
That's where the negative outlook comes from. And so it sounds like any sort of instability, perhaps, or perceived instability, makes investors worried. And I mean, I think if I'm thinking about it, so, personal finance, if I want to get a good rate on my mortgage, I make sure that my credit rating is good. And it's not the only thing that drives the decisions I make, but it's certainly an important factor because I want to make sure that I have a good credit rating so that I can get good loans. In the same vein, I think what I heard from you was that it would be it would be advisable for us to maintain such independence. Is that
I think
well,
what I heard?
the way that
I'll let you answer the question, but I think independent of whatever your recommendation is going to be, we can't, we're not necessarily going to take your advice,
sure,
right?
you
So you
sound
can
like my
give us
wife,
Yeah, so
like my kids.
what I'm saying is, and I don't know if this is what you're alluding to, but, I mean, ratifying the budget, I think is going to get things a lot more complicated. I mean, I don't know what example would be good, but it's like if my parents would have to get into my personal finances, right? That's going to get like pretty bad, right? So that, I don't think it makes sense. Although Carlos feels pretty strongly about that. That's his perspective, but I don't think it makes sense from the ratifying the budget. So the cleaner we have, the separation, I think it's going to be the better. So go ahead and please answer her question.
I'll take you back to 2005, when we did the master restructuring. I felt compelled that the city needed to have more objective transfers of funds from PUB over. No more subjectivity. We had literally an unelected official, the equivalent to Mike Perez, saying on an annual basis, you're going to get this amount of money. That's all there is. And we knew for a fact that he was playing, in a way, the word playing is very liberal, very, I'm sorry for using that word, but at the end of the day, it was not up to him. If I'm an owner, and the way I see it, the city owns that enterprise for two particular reasons: to provide reliable and sustainable power. I think that's what the charter says. And the way we wrote that bond ordinance back in '05 was to make things seamless, that if I needed to increase rates, the PUB board will come with a recommendation. When the Fitch report says policy changes that limit PUB's independent decision-making ability, is that the board itself, staff alone, cannot just make a recommendation to the board and says, we're going to raise rates. They actually go hire professionals and work with professionals to put the rates in place. If you, for example, give the power to the commission to appoint board members and then get rid of them at your will, which is very natural, but the PUB is not an enterprise system that is like your bridge system. To run an electric company is a very difficult thing. It's subject to a lot of factors out there, weather factors for that matter. One of the things that I was very concerned about when this was going on in terms of the forensic audit, the last thing you want is to have so much cloud of distrust out there that if something really happens, like losing power, you get hit by a hurricane and you got to get to cash, and how are you going to recover from that? So you want to earn the trust back from the citizens as quickly as you can by doing the good actions. All I can tell you, back in '05, what we did in '05 with that bond ordinance, it was a market practice. It was very well received. That PUB, to my knowledge, got a 2 rating increase step in '05. And I was criticized back then, before we did that it was going to be downgraded. I said, no, because what the rating agencies, they want flexibility, they want transparency, and they want support from this body, the commission, to that body over there. So if you start putting clouds or intruding with how they're acting over there, like removing them at will, well, it takes about, I will tell you, if any of you get on that board over there, it's going to take you at least 9 months to understand how that system works over there. And just because you understand it doesn't mean that you understand the culture of the industry. So to make decisions like that, you have to rely on these people. You have to rely, even these people, they have to rely on consultants like ourselves. So it's very difficult to just say, I'm going to put this fellow in and I'm going to them out because I don't like them. And I've been in this commission before where I've been put under the same pressure, on the gun. You know, I think I've known you, some of you well enough to know that I'll call the spade a spade. But even then, sometimes I don't have the majority. You know, many consultants come before you and tell you, hey, whether I have the majority or not, here's what you need to watch out there. So going back to the concerns about making changes to the charter is not the constitution of between the PUB and the lender. The constitution of operations of PUB is the bond ordinance. So bond ordinance has been there since the 1970s. We amended it in 05 to simply make the transfer of funds, the flow of funds, more
Stable.
more
Predictable.
consistent, I guess. And this is what we did back then. So, I'm sorry.
Can I ask a
Mr.
question
Gonzalez.
about that transfer of funds?
Yes, sir.
In light of Uri and I think it was $10 million, it appears as though maybe it's not as stable as it has been throughout the years. Would you agree with that?
What do you mean by stable?
Well, what I mean is, if you look at the transfer of funds throughout the years, they are pretty stable.
Mhm.
Given the ERCOT rules and how PUB had to sell the energy back to the grid, they had a windfall in revenue, right? And in doing so, they were able to transfer, I think, an additional $10 million to the
That's
city of
right.
Brownsville.
I have it on the screen. It was $20 million.
Right. And so would you suggest that maybe a cap would help both entities in financial stability? Or do we
Well,
not plan for some, like a
no.
Uri?
If you go back to this, what's on the screen, in 07, we did this transfer back we started with the transfers back in 06. In 05, the city got 2.3 million. In 06, it got 6.1 million. And ever since then, cash transfers to the city have been steadily going up. Some years were not, like in 2012, it was 7.7 million, but in 13, it was 7.85 million. Then by 15, went up by $9 million. In 21, it went to 20 from a previous year at 11.1. I suspect 2022, the year that we completed, probably went down to $11 million, somewhere in there. I stand to be corrected. But I did say to the staff, I told John Brusick specifically, and Noel Bernal at the time, you should work this out, because PUB at the time, despite the fact that they generated all this adjusted gross revenues, which is what the formula states, in that you have adjusted gross revenues, and at that time, the city gets a city transfer after he pays, basically that's what it was. At the adjusted gross revenues, you get 10%. And when you're talking to M&O and all those other expenses, the expenses because of Uri were higher. So the enterprise, the system itself, ended up losing money, right? About 30 million?
Oh, at the end of the day, yeah. At the end of the day, we were short 35 million
For the
after the $10 million transfer.
2021 fiscal year?
So we took the 10% at the top, and we start running the waterfall. He was actually running, the city didn't mind, they didn't care what they were doing. The city knew that they were gonna get a windfall of 10% at the top.
Right,
And your point is, could we have made a cap? You could make a cap, and again, it's your prerogative to make that recommendation. My prerogative is that once you put it in writing, and again, the charter is one thing, the bond ordinance is another thing. To change that in the bond ordinance is literally going to be impossible. Why? Because you have to refinance or restructure everything for that purpose. You can change the charter, and then when the bonds get paid off, we can mirror future bond issuances to what the charter says. I always felt like prudency should help. Why do I not want my duck, my golden goose over there, to keep being protected? I mean, at the end of the day, we're all in it together. Well, if you look at the city, at the city's finances, and you go to the amount of geo debt that the city has, you know, the city of Brownsville, it's the, let's see, it's about the 16th largest city, 18th largest city in the state. And this is a chart that I don't have the right rank, it's at the bottom. But basically, being as it may, Brownsville has $190 million worth of debt outstanding. At the time, city management had a CIP and still has a CIP. And correct me if I'm wrong, Helen, but I think it's north of $50 million. But that included the broadband project. No? Huh? Lupe, you remember? So we had a CIP, let's say, of 50 million. And we knew that if we get $10 million, we could use that for the broadband project. I didn't make that. I mean, I'm just here listening to what they're thinking of doing. This is what we could have done. Okay. If you're sorry.
Yeah, so what we did was we took that money and put it into infrastructure. We have $167 million of deferred infrastructure as you drive through the city, potholes and is what you feel. And we have many drainage projects worth hundreds of millions of dollars of deferred maintenance. And so we took that one-time money to really fix our streets, our capital improvement program. We had never had a capital improvement program prior to 2019. So the first time in the city's history, we created a 5-year capital improvement program with worth $160 million of deferred maintenance. And so what we did was take that money to really fix our streets, which at the end of the day, help PUB, help our residents, help our cities, help our police and fire. So the way we're using the money is just to provide the basic services that we have. 71% of our budget is personnel. 91% of our police budget for police, 91% of their budget is personnel. So that's how we use the money.
No, if I could, I'd like to make a couple of quick comments and observations. With all due respect, Carlos, I want to disagree with you about the term held hostage. You're no more held hostage by the rating agencies than you are held hostage by your mother-in-law. You can displease or please her, but there's very little opportunity for her to come in and influence you other than politically. In this case, the city commission can do whatever it chooses. There are things that happen as a result. And that doesn't mean you're held hostage. It just means you've got some people who are going to make judgments based on our judgments. And that's fair because that's the way the bond market works, especially in the secondary market, which brings me to the point of a capital improvements program is the next time our rating will really matter is when we decide to go for new bonds. Right now, it's only the secondary market that suffers. My clients, but it's not a situation where we're going to suffer. It doesn't change our payment or anything. If we went to no coverage or just $1 extra above our debt coverage, it wouldn't matter here until we went and asked for new money for new capital improvement projects. That is oversimplified perhaps, but if we have got a 5-year history of saying, we took this hit in 2022. We brought down our capital reserve or our debt reserve. And over the next 5 years, we return to an even healthier position. 1.6, 1.8, which is fairly common, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then we ask for money. We've still got to go back and say, we did a good job and here's how it is. And it's a sales pitch. It's a travel to New York City. It's all of that stuff.
We don't travel to New York City anymore.
You don't do any of that anymore? It used to be.
We used to do it.
Yeah, whatever. It's all done by Zoom now, I guess.
Yeah.
So the point again is right now, a change in the ratings is not the impact that it would be if we were next year going to go, and we may be planning to go to a new capital improvements program.
David, you're probably right, but that is not the optics that I'm hearing. What I'm hearing is that these bond covenants were set up based on certain criteria. number of PUB board members, how they're governance, how they're appointed, et cetera, et cetera. And I think the way Noe explained it, yeah, there's factors out there that if anything changes, it's gonna make them nervous,
Yes, absolutely.
right?
But
It's gonna
that
make them
doesn't mean
nervous.
they're
So in essence, you could have, I guarantee you will have city commissioners gonna say, well, no, we can't do this because it's gonna make our bonding agencies nervous, and they could increase the rates, we are violating the bond covenants by changing it. And when they do that, they can call them.
Without arguing about it too much, I would just say the bond covenants are there
Correct.
where they are. We certainly don't want to violate any bond covenants, but a change in how we appoint members of the PUB board may or may not be a change in the bond covenant.
Right, well, that's why I
Yes,
was asking.
Yes, in the 2005 ordinance, there was language mirroring the charter on the PUB board makeup. Now, I did not read the 2022 ordinance as closely, and you might know if it does mirror the charter as well, because then that would mean that a change to how board members are removed, for example, that could actually influence the bond.
Right, so. In essence, if we choose to do nothing, which is, I hope we don't go that way, then they're going to do it because, well, we're in fear, we being the city commission and maybe PUB, we're in fear of those bonds that we have out there changing. I disagree that this would have an impact on these bonds now. Not when they get issued later, they would have an impact on these bonds, because if they lent the money based on certain criteria and that criteria has changed, they could say, hey.
It would have effect.
Say the same thing.
Yeah, it would have
These
effect.
bonds,
It wouldn't affect how much we were paying.
these bonds are $290 million outstanding.
Right.
Once they're out there on the street, that's secondary market.
Right.
So they're trading out there.
What would you say the impact on the ratepayer would be, though? I think that's,
None until, like David says, until we borrow again. But if I loaned you money 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and you had an A+ rating, and now you're at A-, and I happen to be a proud owner of those PUB bonds that David sold to me, what's the likelihood of you buying that bond again? The municipal entities who have an A+ rating are expected to behave like an A+ rated security as long as those bonds are outstanding. Granted, the lender is already exposed to market volatility. Prices go up and down regardless what the rating is. But if your rating gets sacrificed during the course of you owning that bond, and then you come to the market with a $100 million loan, conceivably, you may be downgraded, but if the interest rates go back down from currently 4.5%, 4.7% down to 2.5%, who cares what the rating was? Because the market, you rode the market wave, right? The market went in your favor. But in the markets of today, with as much volatility there is a change on spread. You're going to pay a higher price, not only because interest rates are higher and volatile, you're going to have a higher price because your rating has gone down. A negative outlook could have an effect. Think of the negative outlook on Fitch, an A+. If it drops to a downgrade, it's an A. I'm not worried about that rating. I'm worried about the S&P rating of an A-. If it goes from A-, the next rating is BBB+. The differential today of an A- credit rating to a BBB+ is probably 50 to 60 basis points. That's when the ratepayer gets hurt. You borrow $100 million, 50 basis points, it's literally, I want to say, $500,000 a year. You're borrowing out 30 years, do the math. $50 million future value, maybe $11 million present value. So those are the kind of things that you need to be mindful of when you play with ratings. And this is a very significant utility system. Will the credit ratings of the parent company get hurt? The question was asked, if we get hurt at the bottom, will the GO side get hurt at the top? You know, right now the city ratings on GOs are AA by S&P, AA- by Fitch, and AA3 by Moody's. a double A credit today is very strong. In fact, of the top 25 cities, the city of Brownsville right now has the lowest credit ratings at the double A minus, but you're still a double A credit. If you have a son, and I call the enterprise systems to me are like children to the parent company. So the son is out of line, his wife said, I'm going to co-sign with you, but then the wife is the high income earner here. And the son says, well, I don't want to pay this loan. I don't like the way we signed this mortgage. The mortgage banker, he don't want to know about your dilemma. You signed something. So both of you are committed to paying it back. And I think when it comes to governance is, I don't care what you'll do. I have a bond covenant. I have a bond agreement with you. And that's why I say that's the Constitution versus the city charter.
So did you just say that out of the top 25 largest cities in Texas, we have the worst credit rating?
Yeah. And a
And-
lot of it is embedded. I'm sorry, finish the question.
Okay, so we have the worst credit rating already. And then Fitch just made it really clear, the same day as our last meeting, they published this report, they making it very clear that any disruption to PUB's independent decision-making would likely lead to a negative rating.
To a downgrade, yeah.
But even with that, you're telling us that you're more concerned with the S&P's rating. That is highly informative. Thank you. We really appreciate that you're here and that you can share with us and clarify all these questions.
If I may, and thank you for your observations. You did a good job at the top there. No, I have gained from hearing from you about the structure of the debt and and I would assume that there are capital improvement projects in the offing for both PUB and the city. Otherwise, I would be very surprised if we weren't looking at something there anyway. So my point was intended to be that we do want to maintain, to the best of our ability, the city would like to maintain the best rating possible. And it would be questionable, if not unwise, to try to do something that would unwind or damage the standing that we already have with the current ratings that we have. So I wasn't trying to advocate that we do things that would challenge that, but simply to say that it's an activity that the city is undergoing in an evolutionary process that is logical and makes sense from time to time to review these things. And the mere fact that the rating agencies get nervous about it is not entirely a set of circumstances that should bother. One second. Is it not possible that we could draft a charter review? I'm sorry, I do want to hear from you. Is it not possible that the Charter Review Committee could recommend things that would actually strengthen the relationship with PUB and its operating board without, in fact, damaging, perhaps even strengthening the relationship in such a way that the ratings agency would say that makes sense? Is that not the possibility?
I mean, I think, again, I go back to the issue of you have an opportunity to make things stronger. And I think one of the ways to make it stronger is that either you do it by charter or you do it by a recommendation that they should meet more often. It's too big of an enterprise for the commission to not be just made aware by the mayor. It's not fair to the mayor for that matter.
And I'm all for meetings together. I would like to make a clarification that we are the 18th largest city. Many of those cities, as you can see, Houston, Austin, Dallas, I mean, they're very large cities, right, with very large budgets, which is very different from ours. And also we're a border economy. So there's all that economy, there's an underground economy. It's true. It happens in Tijuana. It happens in, El Paso, and we're a different type of region. So our economy differs from the rest of Central and North Texas. I would like to say that Fitch rating affirmed the city is a AA. The city has a AA minus credit rating with a positive outlook, reflecting the city's financial stability and revenue growth. It issued on October 14th of this year, evaluated the city's revenue and expenditure framework, its operating performance, and its debt and bonds and certificates of obligation, and recognized Brownsville with a very high credit quality. And I just wanted to say that for the record, that while we, may have the lower, it's a very strong credit rating, and actually improved from stable to positive this year.
And it's not apples to apples, but I think I'm correct when I say that the United States of America currently has a AA rating. Instead of, they once had the AAA, but it's now AA.
Who's this?
USA.
The US government?
US
It's tri-
government.
Still AAA, to my knowledge.
No. not
Well,
all
you're the
their
one that
bonds.
sells those bonds. I mean,
Not all their bonds. You can buy US government bonds that are AA.
Well, I mean, I misspoke, Mr. Mota. Another client of ours is City of Dallas, and they were AAA 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Today, City of Dallas is A1 by Moody's and AA minus by S&P. But I'm looking at the columns here. Among all the top 25 cities, Brownsville is at the bottom. And it's at the bottom of the AA categories for what Helen just mentioned, that the general economy, in the methodology of ratings, general economy is the largest factor. So median incomes, how educated are your people are, unemployment rates, and so on and so forth. Poverty rates, you tend to be a border community. Unlike El Paso, you don't have a military base. So the military base helps El Paso a lot, the economy. Laredo is in the middle of this corridor of crossing, so they recognize that too. McAllen is sort of a landlocked city, so a lot of the improvements pretty much are made already, and thus Brownsville falls in that category. If you add, I was asking Lupe Granado, the finance director of the city, if the city's PUB transfer over to the city reflects a 13% of its operating budget, and let's say that drops to 10%. I'm not suggesting it's going to drop to 10%, but if it does, then they start looking at the city's geo debt rating. But think of the rating analyst at Fitch saying it's negative outlook, may get downgraded in a year from now. Then the geo analyst says, what happened? So he's got it's just like a ripple effect. You throw a rock out there in the lake and boom, hits, and then ripple effect of having to communicate more and more. The city gets a lot of its employees recruited by PUB. There's an inconsistency of compensation between what PUB people get paid and benefits and what this city gets paid and benefits. And I've seen that 30 years. Not long ago, someone that I knew well, we lost him, and he said PUB, great fella, and I don't blame him for that. But it's really hard to maintain continuity at the parent company if your subordinates are coming in and taking people away. And I think that's part of an open dialogue that you should have between a shareholder and his employees. Hey, what are you doing? Why, let's have a conversation here. And that serves the city better. If you have good finance people, good management, have continuity, that's what the rating agencies want. When I talk about governance, it's not just commission and board, it's also about staff, having succession plans, having a plan to what happens if this guy gets run over by a truck, whether it's a finance director, whether it's a utility director, et cetera. I don't know that you can put that in a charter, but you can make suggestions besides charter,
By the way, I
Clarification.
was wrong about US government bonds. That's not true. You're right, it's still AAA. I'm thinking of the time that the S&P threatened to make them a AA bond. I want to correct the fact that I was wrong there.
Thank you.
I guess want some clarification on the bond ordinance, or is there anything that we would do right now, or if we made a suggestion to, add something about removing a board member for cause, or something similar that, these other cities have in their ordinances around Texas, would any of those suggestions make any impact on the current bonds?
I don't think so.
Okay, so the only thing that we'd be needing to address is how any changes we make affect future bonds. And is that something that we can just call one of these agents and ask them, look, is this something within your all's parameters?
It's kind of funny, the agencies, when they give an opinion, they give an opinion in the name of a corporation. And you think you have lawyers, these guys have a lot of lawyers. It makes it really difficult to have them, an analyst cannot guarantee me anything. An analyst is like me, coming before a board of 7 or 8 senior analysts at that given corporation. I'll give my points about PUB's credit or the city's credit, and then you're supposed to either agree with me or not agree with me. So for them to tell you categorically, oh, if you do this, you're not gonna downgrade me, they're not gonna tell you that.
Well, I could see how it could potentially impact on making a little bit more of the changes to the actual operations, but, simple changes to, look, we need a supermajority instead of the complete board to remove a member in 1 year, or for cause, or we're going to add some qualifications to appointing the board members. I can't imagine making those changes would in any way impact, someone's perception of how the
It shouldn't.
rating of PUB is.
It shouldn't until it does. And the way that it does is that if you have new members of the commission come in play, and there's 4 of them that don't like 3 members of the PUB. And this happened to be the most, whether it's eloquent, sophisticated, educated, they understand the system, well, they want to remove them because they don't have anything in common. And I've been into commission meetings before, and I invite you to come over and see sometimes.
Well, and I agree with you. And so I do think, personally, I think there should be limitations as to the ability to remove, and they can't just remove at will, because then you do have some issues as to impacting the independent nature of how the board is being run. But I don't think that should impact someone saying, look, there's specific reasons, and here's a cause, and here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And so we're going to remove you for that basis. In fact, I think that if you can't do that, that in and of itself would impact PUB's operation, and saying, look, you guys have a board that's not operating and you can't do anything about it. I think that would have the same inverse.
I mean, conflicts of
Sorry,
interest.
you can do something about it. There is, an ethical review, right?
Right now, I think you could only remove one.
No,
but-
for like PUB board members also fall under that. Yes.
Is that true? Do we know that to be a fact?
Yeah, there's an ethics review, no?
Or PUB
For the board members, whenever you get
trustee
a.
is subject to?
Right?
Yes, it was
And
amended.
I would also ask, I don't think in the history of Brownsville, have they ever removed a board member from PUB? I was asking Lupe, and they have never exercised that right.
Yeah, but it was amended to include PUB board members.
Those of you who don't know me, I'm Norith Golonsky. I'm one of the city commissioners, but I had the privilege to serve on the PUB board for about 6 years before I was elected to be a city commissioner. In the time that I was on the PUB board, we would have more, you never have a problem of, well, there are ethics, but not as it affects there might be ethical issues that might arise among board members, but not as it relates to their purposefully making decisions that would damage the running of the company, or damage, really hurt the ratepayers. What I saw more common, and yet it was hard to address, was lack of attendance. In the 6 years that I was there, I remember at least 2 of my peers, they would rarely show up, but they would always show up just in time to make the requirement that I think it's you cannot miss more than 120 days of meetings, or 140 without, and then you vacate, you automatically vacate your seat. My whole thing is, why do you want someone on a board who's not showing up to meetings, who's not being, who's not engaged, who's not participating, who just kind of shows up because, oh, I'm on the PUB board and it's something I can tack on to my, to my resume. So, but in that case, there was nothing you could do about it, because no one at the city commission was aware really of what was happening, probably. And the language as it says in the city charter, would have triggered an automatic vacation, but people are smart enough to get around it. But in terms of like ethics and stuff, I do believe that maybe Chapter 38 would apply to it, but you don't really have issues of people doing, voluntarily doing things to like derail the track that PUB is doing.
And I would think.
It'd be hard to do.
I would think missing, 4 consecutive board meetings may qualify as cause, to have someone removed.
I actually think that would lead to possibly a higher bond rating because, you'd have more stability, you'd have more involved board members.
And keep in mind that the Ethics Commission makes a recommendation to the city commission, and the ultimate decision is up to the city commission if they're going to accept removal, for example, or
So how do
maybe a reprimand.
So how do you combine an ethics commission's recommendation with the charter saying only one member can be removed a year by unanimous decision? And then if someone is involved that has some sort of conflict and they abstain, then it's impossible to have that vote. Or is there another way to get one of these board members removed?
Yeah, so I mean, it would be under the charter. They're not inconsistent. Let's say that hypothetically, there is someone that is found to have violated the ethics. They make a recommendation to city commission. City commission under the charter can remove that individual under the city charter. It is limited to 1 every 12 months, so we would hope it wouldn't be 2 or 3 individuals going before the ethics commission. I think we would have another problem there. But in those instances, let's say there's more than 2 or 3 involved, it's hard to say what the outcome will be or recommendation, because they have, besides removal, it can be reprimand, and there's a few other requirements that allow within the ethics commission's recommendation. And so, yes, they are limited to 1 removal per 12 months, but there is that process in place for that.
But the removal every 12 months right now it's not limited to, it's for any reason, right? And so if there is some sort of, any issue beyond either ethics or either for cause for missing, too many meetings or not attending or some other sort of violation, there's no other means or methods to get multiple people removed?
But I think also at some point, the board, if they cross a certain line, they may take on personal liability as well, right? And so I think given that, that's another line of.
But on that same deal, I mean, that's something that would prompt the city as overseeing that board to say, look, we're gonna go ahead and jump in because we don't want to have anyone exposed to some sort of liability here. And so I guess that would be one of the issues. And while I have stand right now, I did want to comment on what would happen just hypothetically in the event that the city did not ratify the budget.
Well, I don't know if anything has happened since. I think the reason that I brought up the ratification of compensation, and that is because many of the city commissioners present and past.
No, but
I've
like if they
indicated-
refuse to do that, what happens to the ongoing operations? of the
Oh,
city?
nothing.
If I could just jump in here, I think we need clarification from our finance director with regard to what we do with the budget because we do not approve it or ratify it.
Just to be clear,
We
are you
understand.
asking, if we ratify it, we don't ratify the budget for PUB?
No, we understand that.
Yeah, we know that.
Okay.
If there was a charter amendment, for requiring the city to do that annually, what would happen if the city commissioners decided they did not want to?
How does the PUB continue to operate? Or are they held hostage by the city saying, we want you to do certain things?
And I would just say with regard to our other Economic Development Corporation boards, which is very different entities, they do come to the city commission for approval of their budgets. And normally, they'll even have a work session before, and we've never really seen any kind of difficulty with those processes.
I don't imagine they have the same overhead as
Yeah,
PUB.
I agree. But
And so if PUB is subject to approval from the city of Brownsville, and we're going to stamp and say we're going to approve your budget. If the city decides that they don't want to do that, and I guess this might be a better question for PUB, but what would happen to?
For the For
the
those,
operation
can answer that?
for those economic development corporations, the oversight is statutory. So the Texas legislature saw it in their forethought to put it upon the governing body to ratify the Economic Development Corporation's budget. Now, if y'all add it to the charter, I would have to defer how that affects the bond ratings, et cetera.
Well, let's go directly to Mr. Tijerina's question. What happens if the city commission chooses not to adopt the budget? Well, they can do that right now with their own budget. If they get a majority, the commission does not want to adopt their budget, business goes on. I mean, it's not going to, you're not going to, well, it's not like the federal government you're going to shut down.
And I think what you get if you don't ratify a budget, you get a nick in your credit rating. You're gonna know what the charter says.
I think, Noe, the
So
issue with, the
ratification
issue
does-
with that about the ratification of the budget is simply because current and past city commissioners have indicated that they don't believe that they know what's going on. They haven't been involved. Maybe it's their choosing, but they haven't been involved, and they want to be able to have the opportunity to approve upper level management. They want to be able to approve it. Now, what happens if they don't approve it? That's a legal issue. And, you know, the odds of that happening, it can happen at city, it can happen at the county, it can happen here. You could get a majority that doesn't want to adopt the budget or a tax rate or whatever it is. It can
I'd
happen.
like to speak to that. So as someone who's now been in the city commission for 3 years plus, I find that the biggest problem is unless you have had the experience of being at PB, it's really hard to understand what they do. The city, there's so much that y'all do. You don't have enough time to really dedicate to everything. And so unless you really go out of your way to attend PUB meetings, to read their agendas, to speak to the person that you appointed, the city charter provides for you, for the city commission to look at the records, to meet with PUB, but we've never done it as
Right.
the city commission.
Right.
It's our own fault.
Right.
Like, so I have trouble when my peers say, well, it's because they never tell us. Well, what have you done to try to find out what's going on at PUB? Because why am I the only one here right now? I understand people have families in this Christmas time and there's a lot of things, but you know what? This is important to me. I was elected to be here. I was elected to find out what's going on and to voice the opinion of people. That's why I'm here.
Well, Commissioner, I think that your point is valid. If someone believes that they cannot do it, then they shouldn't seek the position. They shouldn't run for public office if they're not willing to dedicate the time, and they shouldn't accept a position to PUB if they're not willing to put in the time as well. And that's why I think that attendance criteria is important. You know, with the Texas Workforce Commission Board locally here, the same thing. You know, when I became county judge the first time, I actually removed people, and of course, they never supported me again, but I removed them because they were not attending meetings. They, you know, padded their resume. They liked the statewide conferences and, you know, the parties and all that. They did that. So if you're not willing to, you know, to put in the time, then don't run either for a public office or don't be appointed. If no one here has a time to come, well, then don't accept the, you know, the position of charter review. It's really not that difficult.
What I would say with regard to the city and its budget, we start this budgetary process very early
Mhm.
on. And so what we do is have budget subcommittee and subcommittee meetings. We begin in March. I mean, we just.
Well, you
adopted it
You start to begin to build consensus
Yes, sir.
on budgetary items, okay? So there are no surprises at the end. The same thing with, you know, with your tax rate and
Yes, sir.
all that.
Yes,
You know,
sir.
there's a process. I think PUB does the same thing, don't they? Because PUB's year end is what, September? September 30th. So I would imagine they start working on their budget in April or May? Yeah, and so there's consensus, but I think Tomas's question is, I still believe that, and I think, Commissioner, I think you're absolutely right. I think that when was the last time a city commissioner, either present or past, has attended a PUB meeting?
Well, I haven't, at least a few. of
Well, I
my
wasn't
peers,
referring to you.
But it's only because there's been a lot of publicity lately.
Right.
Should we require city commissioners to attend all PUB meetings as if they
Yeah,
were
we
board
can.
members so that they could be informed as well? I mean, I'm saying this jokingly, but I would like to read, and I hope I'm not getting ahead. But in 2005, the voters voted for, and this is Proposition 12, is the charter amendment. And it was to change certain requirements for PUB board members to remain in good standing on the board, including absences and not having any outstanding debt to the city other than tax debt. And it also eliminates the requirement that PUB board members must own property within the city. So it sounds like the absences would have been taken care of then, and I'm wondering if somebody could
Well,
say,
Well,
what-
I don't mean to interrupt, but I think that would be part of one of our work sessions items. So if it would be okay to come back to that during the work session item. We do have one speaker for public comments. I don't know if y'all want to entertain
Right,
her at
can
this
you-
time.
Yeah,
Yeah, if y'all want to take a break and listen to public comment, yeah.
Yeah, and I would just say one thing, I know with a former city I was working with, we had quarterly meetings with, our BISD. And so what we did was enter into an MOU for quarterly meetings, and we each kind of we had an agenda, and both committees would meet, the city commission and the ISD board, and you had quarterly meetings. So that's an example of
No,
one.
when somebody, I think, Tomas, to answer your question, I know that 'cause I just read something somewhere where a city or a county did not want to adopt their budget or their something, and the state came in and sued them. So I think if the city decided not to ratify, they could be sued.
Well, to clarify with municipalities, if a municipality does not adopt their budget or set a tax rate, it's defaulted to the prior year.
Right.
And so that's in the local government code. So that's for municipalities. And I'm sure it works similar to maybe counties. I
That,
couldn't speak
it
on
does,
that.
and I think that could happen with PUB.
That I wouldn't know. They're different entity
Right, I understand.
entirely, but I'm pretty sure business would continue as usual. So,
as usual for the prior year.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but when you do that, you're in a world of hurt, okay, because everything that you've budgeted for. But I think if it gets to the point where the city does, should, must, shall verify the budget, they're involved in the budgetary process with PUB starting in April. You know, it can be the whole city commission, or it can be two members, or, you know, short of a quorum to do that, so you don't have this hiccup when it comes to adopting the budget. My concern is just hearing from past people saying that, and I think Nurith is right, they didn't want to attend, or they didn't have the time to attend, or they didn't think it was a big deal. Well, what's happened over the last 30 days has not only created a mistrust with the ratepayer and the taxpayers, but it also calls for more accountability from the city commission and the PUB board members. None of them that are there today, I believe, were when all this happened. But I think that will cure the fact that the city commissioners say they don't have enough input into PUB activity. But
And that certainly seems to be what they want, is more understanding, more accountability, a direct path that allows them to find
Yeah,
out what's
yeah.
going on.
I think so.
we have a
So we're not
speaker?
here to investigate any of it.
May I say, it took me about 3.5 years to finally understand kind of get a vague idea of what they're telling me, because it's not just, for me, my background, I'm a lawyer, I have my MBA, but I never did utilities. And so you don't really understand, you have to keep each utility separate. You can't mix you can't mix the money that's going for water, go it to electric. You can't use electric to subsidize water and wastewater, and both, wastewater is always a money loser. Like it doesn't make enough money. So it's hard for for a city commissioner who's already being torn by the airport, the libraries, the parks, the economic development, all the police, fire, all these other things that we have to think about. And then on top of that, learn the utilities. So, I'm sorry, Lupe, but the PUB stuff is a lot more detailed in their finance stuff. And so I felt like I was digging in a lot deeper, and you get a lot more detail when they're doing the budget preparations, and I know where the money is going better. Here at the city, it's just kind of like, oh, we're going to put this. It's just very vague, kind of, or it's a lot more broader general.
Yeah.
So it's a definite, it's like grad school and maybe undergrad.
Yeah.
So, kind of thing.
Well, and I think that's why it's an independent agency. I mean, right? It's set up that way to be. And so I'm starting to believe that any changes that we do here that affects their independence, really, I can understand, not being a finance guy, but I can begin to understand, how the bondholders are worried about this.
So if y'all don't have any further questions for me, Mr. Hinojosa, he can stay to answer questions in other workshop sessions. But at this time, the chair, did you want to hear the public speakers? Public comments?
Yes, let's acknowledge public comments.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Got a quick question or clarification, and I don't know how relevant it is or the information that you needed. The 10% that we get from PUB, that's used for maintenance and operations of the general fund. That covers salaries, maintenance and operation, parks, PD, everything. It's averages about $15 to $17 million. About $10 million is used to cover hard costs, and the other about $4.5 to $5 million is utilities. Utilities, mainly all street lights of the city, traffic signals, some free services that are done to nonprofit organizations. So that averages about $4.5 to $5 million. The rest of it, $10 million, is for maintenance and operations of the general fund. Should there be a decrease in that, and the city is very prudent on that $10 million, and that's where we budget. Any excess of that $10 million, we did about since 2019, the city started dedicating any windfalls. Case in point, the $10 million for one-time projects. One-time, we're not beefing up our maintenance and operation type of activities, not beefing up salaries. Those salaries have been stayed pretty stagnant. There is not quite a lot of money that's put into, or more money. A lot of it is to deferred maintenance. We need streets, infrastructure, buildings. All that money, any windfalls, especially the $10 million, that's what it was used for, and that's what it will continue to be used for if there's any monies in excess. What we budget, anything after that is used to dedicate for our deferred maintenance items. That's, I just wanted to clarify that in case somebody needed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay,
public comment?
you want to call a public speaker?
Yes.
Yes.
Her name is Ms. Susan Rubalcaba. Yes, 3 minutes.
I'm sorry, excuse me, Mr. Rubin. Do I keep the time or you?
Okay, and that was, I'm sorry,
Don't
what was
start the
that,
clock
3
yet.
minutes?
Don't start the clock yet, because I've been waiting. I mean, because after that, I wish I would have written a speech after hearing all of this too, because that's amazing what's been going on. Go ahead. Good afternoon, committee members. On behalf of every affected citizen in the city, I'm here to speak regarding our concerns and expectations of you as members of the Charter Review Committee. The charter establishes the government structure of the city and defines boundaries, specific powers, functions, essential procedures, and legal control. The charter gives the city the flexibility to govern their own affairs so that they do not have to rely entirely on federal and state laws. According to the City of Brownsville, the purpose of this committee shall be to review the city charter regarding possible revisions to the charter, determine which articles and sections of the charter need amendment, deletion, or addition, develop a list of possible amendments to the charter for review by the City Commission, and present committee recommendations to the City Commission for the purpose of calling a charter amendment election. This charter committee was revived for the sole purpose to immediately begin an amendment to the section that involves PUB, specifically Part 1, Article 6, Letter C, regarding board members. This should be your first priority. As it stands, the people via the commission have no authority to remove board members once they are appointed. As you're aware, we can only remove one within a 12-month period by unanimous vote. That will essentially never happen. That just isn't logical. The city has been drowned in conflicts. In fact, there are conflicts right on this committee. Last meeting was like watching a bad tennis match, and I'll say it just happened again. It was disorganized and gave people little hope that we will see any amendments come this election cycle. Bottom line, we need more control over PUB. We deserve transparency in all functions of the company, from executive salaries to budget and spending oversight, to board members, to even large purchases. This is a public company, not a private one owned by a select few. The only way for us to have that control and oversight is via a charter amendment. Currently, it is written in a way that we as citizens, the commission and mayor, must tippy-toe around PUB as if they hold the golden key to the city. It is wrong, it's unethical, and it needs to be changed. We are holding each one of you responsible since you accepted this task. I would suggest to prioritize the parts of the charter that need immediate amending, like the PUB board. appointments and removals, qualifications, and disclosure of possible conflicts of interest prior to their appointment. Then move on to the oversight of operations, access and review of the budget, and approval of salaries for executive positions. Simply changing those items will give the people more control over the utility company they own. We have a CEO who is on a 60-day paid vacation. Meanwhile, single moms are 2 months behind in their PUP payments. I am fed up with the self-serving elected and appointed Pinocchios we have representing us. How soon everyone grows a tail and forgets the oath they took when elected or appointed. You have a chance to make a real change for the people. Do not let us down. We won't go away. We have our eyes and our ears and on every action. Empty words and empty
Thank you.
promises will
Sorry.
not deter us. We are watching,
Time has
recording,
passed.
and taking notes. Thank you.
All right, next item, work session discussion related to potential Article 6 charter amendments as submitted by Charter Review Committee members. So, yeah, can we? Yeah, I'm sorry, it's the spreadsheet, but we're going to switch over the presentation. So before you, you all have the spreadsheet, and Victor Flores reached out and requested your, kind of your wish list for the proposed changes to the charter amendment. There we go. And so this first slide shows, and it's broken up by appointment of board members, removal, certain qualifications, et cetera. Just as a summary, 3 committee members didn't fill in or submit any feedback. We had 2 that had quite a few changes that they were requesting, and 2 additional that had a few changes here and there. So I don't know if you want to discuss these by line item, or if you want to discuss these based on which one has more than the 3 or 4 votes needed.
Well, I think if one of the issues was going to be the removal, I don't know if we could tie that in with your all's comments on individual consideration for number 1, or repeal the past recommendation.
Well, so this part is the work session. This is just for discussion purposes, but we can close it and then move on to the.
No, well then, I
Well,
guess
could we
for
switch?
discussion, we'll talk about the
Um,
removal of board members. I think one of the deals that we had is that right now, there's an issue as to whether we can, or 1 board member every 12 months. One of the, proposals would be that, number 1 is tie in the removal with the qualifications. And so if a board member has to have specific qualifications, including living within the district, or, not having any conflicts, not doing business with PUB, and they don't meet those qualifications, then they're automatically removed. The other deal would be just to be able to remove them by supermajority in the event that there's a cause shown, and then approved by the city commission. And again, this is just suggestions open for discussion. Happy to hear some feedback, but if we're looking.
Would it be okay to switch the work sessions, because the information in the second work session will be relevant to the committee members? Would everybody be okay with that?
We have first,
Okay.
second.
Those will be approved?
Right. So I mean, the second work session is really just providing you with a little bit of background about what has already been done. So charter amendments were, taken to 2 voters in 2004 and 2005 related to PUB. And in both times, the amendments that would lead to increased or that would decrease PUB's independence were rejected by voters. And the this one is from 2005, the one that's on the screen now. And Proposition 12 is the one that I read, which it said that it would have requirements for PUB board members to remain in good standing, including absences. And that one, voters approved. But the other ones, if you look at Proposition 13, it would allow the city commission to remove one PUB member per year and remove restrictions that currently exist regarding members' removal from the board. The voters rejected that one. And they also rejected Proposition 14, would delete the section of the city charter that governs how the PUB can use its revenue. And again, this is just information that I thought would be relevant for you or for all of us in making these decisions.
And if I may, I don't mean to insert my opinion, but it was brought up to my attention that, of course, in 2019, I think it was 2019, Jen would know, that another amendment for the PUB was put before the voters and passed. And I think y'all were involved in that recommendation.
If I can just clarify, it was a recommendation that did not come from the Charter Review Committee. It actually came from the City Commission itself. And the amendment was more along the lines of, I'm just paraphrasing off the top of my head, collaboration. There should be more collaboration, or there should be some type of collaboration with PUB and the City Commission with an annual report or something along those lines to be submitted. I can look it up right now in the Muni Code.
And then passed?
It's all the charter amendments that were presented to this citizens passed last year. There were 10, or not last year, I'm sorry, 2 years ago.
That's all I have.
So, I mean, at this time, we'll pass it back to you guys for discussion. My apologies.
I'm sorry, what was
I'm
that?
sorry, we're passing it back to you guys for discussion.
Yeah, I think to the point of our public comments is I think one of the issues that we have been focusing in on or should focus in on is the, appointment and removal. And so I think those are issues that are a little bit easier to take on rather than revenue and how that's going to be attributed. And so, again, one of the proposals would be, as far as the removal, is a supermajority, so you don't have an issue where the city commission is abstaining. And then for cause would be an addition. I don't think that allowing them to remove certain board members for cause on a supermajority aspect is going to have any impact on their independence. I think that would.
Tomas, real quick, on the supermajority, the thing we need to be clear in terms, does it mean a supermajority of those present or a supermajority of the total commission? Because it could happen where some commissioners may decide not to show up in order to not comply with the supermajority vote. We may want to consider that as well.
Well,
So it's got to be, so it'd have to be 5 affirmative votes.
I think you have a little bit more background in sitting on the.
Yeah, it'd have
Meetings
to,
to determine
supermajority, yeah, it'd be
that's-
5. Yeah, if 5 people show up to the city commission, it'd have to be a unanimous of those 5 to say if 2 decided to stay home.
So if I may answer that, just to clarify, I think the recommendation that was approved last week that we're going to reconsider possibly later on the agenda was a supermajority of the city commission.
Correct.
So that would include members.
I think it was a supermajority to appoint and a supermajority to remove.
Now, as my understanding is to you all's removal of that aspect, is that was solely to the definition that was currently in there. So that still didn't impact the 1 per year. It was just solely on the definition of.
Well, remember, I think I said this early on, that I foresee having, like we have here, numerous amendments. We're not going to just have one PUB. I think it's going to be 5 or 6 different amendments that may pass, fail, or people are going to pick and choose which ones they want to pass. But I think we can do one supermajority to appoint, and then another one supermajority to remove. I disagree with Noe. I think board members, like they do at the state, when you get appointed, you serve at will. You're not guaranteed just because it's a 3 or 5 or 6 year appointment, you can be removed at any time.
I don't know if we want, and I'm obviously open to have my mind changed, but I don't know if you want the city commission to be able to remove at will, because then it impacts their ability to make decisions, and then you have politics getting involved.
That's why you have the supermajority that controls. That way you don't have a renegade commission come in one election. They still need to get, let's say if 3 or 4 get elected, they got to pick up one more.
But you're switching one board for the other. I mean, it's just going to be, right now, everyone's against the PUB board at one point in time, but in the past, it's been the city commission that nobody wanted to be in control of certain things. And so I think the way these amendments, maybe at the time that they were submitted, gave an opinion as to the voters' opinion on the city commission and saying at this point, we don't want them to be in charge. And then we have a change in our city commission. And I think that opinion would fluctuate.
What would you recommend?
As far as being able to remove them?
Let's start with the appointment process. What would you recommend for the appointment process? Are you okay with the supermajority?
And can I clarify?
Yes,
For the appointment,
I would
okay.
be okay with that.
Okay, so it appears we have a consensus on that.
it would make it more stable.
How about on a removal
Which we
process?
discussed last week, or
Yeah.
2 weeks ago.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to clarify, are we moving back to the prior?
session
Work
one.
session?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
You got to keep up there, man.
Yeah. And
We're
that-
a fast-moving group
yeah,
here.
and that's what I brought up the last time, that if we can remove them at any time, we're gonna have people being removed on a yearly basis. And
Okay,
then-
so then what would be look, right now we
Because
have one
as
per year. So
Commissioner
what-
Galansky said.
That's
you know,
gotta
it
change,
took her
right?
3 years just to get to where she understood everything that was going on. So by changing someone on a yearly basis or every 6 months, we're never gonna have a consistency. And that's where Mr. Hinojosa is like, yeah, you know what? It's gonna
Okay, so-
affect this because, well, there's no consistency. It's like, if Island, we have a friend, and you come to me and he says, hey, our buddy needs $100 from each of us. Okay, that's all right. But when you come and say, oh, we need, $5,000, $10,000, it's gonna be one of those, it's gonna be shaky because, are we gonna get our money back? Or are we gonna lose it? What's gonna happen? And that's what I believe Mr. Hinojosa was trying to state, that, you know what, if you don't have a consistency of board members there, and yes, it is an issue because we're here, everything is, why we're here is because of Tenasca. But when you have an inconsistency of board members and you're removing them at will, then everyone that's involved on the PUB side is gonna say, you know what, I don't wanna deal with you. Now you've become a faction of
Okay, well then.
inconsistencies.
Then I would like to hear, then what is the alternative? I mean, if we have a consensus for the appointment process being through a supermajority, then what are the options that we have for the removal process? We know that
We can leave it as
the 1 a year is off, right? I mean, does anybody agree with a 1 a year removal?
I think it should be limited. Yes, I think PUB should remain its independence.
Well, that has nothing with independence. I'm saying, so do we concur that we can only remove 1 PUB board member per year?
If you're talking about an at-will basis, then I would say that we'd want to limit it. If you're talking about for cause, then I would say that if you're going to remove a board member, you put it back on the city commission to articulate, this is why I'm removing them, and here's the reasons, here's the statements, here's the opinions that I'm disagreeing with. So now you have the voters saying, okay, now we know why they're getting rid of this person. So if you have someone that's an agitator on the PUB board, well, then you have to have the commission come in and say, yeah, we don't like him because he's asking too much questions.
Well, but an agitator, to me, or asking a lot of questions is not cause.
Right. And so
Right,
you have
so-
to articulate the cause.
Right,
of
so-
Someone removed.
Legal, what is cause? Define the cause. A felony, conviction of a felony, would that be a cause? Of course.
Yeah.
What
could
else?
be. Yeah, I mean, for cause, there's so many definitions out there, right?
Right, so
I don't
how
think we
are we going to
defined it.
define that in order to remove a board member for cause? I mean, that's way out there.
Yeah.
Right? One thing that I as one don't believe that removing 1 person a year, even that 1 person a year has got to be for cause, right? Is that correct?
Right now, I don't believe so.
I don't remember reading that.
No. But right now, if the commission wants to remove a PUB board member, even 1 a year, can they just do it
Yeah.
for no
Well,
reason?
Currently, right now, it's with or without cause.
With or without
with
cost?
or without cost, just
Okay.
one member per year.
And that's got to be by a unanimous vote of the city commission?
Unanimous vote.
It's never going to happen.
Yeah.
It's never going to happen.
It's never going to
Without
happen because
cost.
we don't have commissioners that go and sit into the meetings or, you know, they're sitting on their hands and they're putting it on us to say, oh, well, you need to fix this. Well, no, if you would attend some of the meetings there at PUB and find out what's going on, they could come back to the city and say, hey, you know what, this is going on. We need to put this on our agenda and take this into consideration.
Okay,
But
so
that's not happening.
So let me ask for the fourth time. What is going to be the committee's recommendation for removal? Leaving it the way it is? One a
I
year?
mean, I'll throw in an idea.
Yeah, throw it out.
And frankly, I'm okay with one member, but I would say with supermajority, no more than 2 per year.
We could do without cause, have it be unanimous, but then for cause, we could consider, you know, certain aspects, I mean, convictions, derelict of duties, attendance.
Well, keep in mind, as
Then
we're
it gets
discussing
more
this, I'm thinking about how it's going to be worded on a ballot.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay,
we
so
could
so
work
the
through
appointment
that.
process is fairly easy.
We could work through that, but
The removal process is where I think we're all kind of struggling defining what that means.
we can circumvent the political aspects of it if there is cause. Meaning we don't need to go to the city commission. These people are removed, period, if they don't attend, if they are convicted of certain offenses.
Okay.
If for some reason and the voters decide that,
So it could be more than one,
it could be more than one. I
Right.
mean, I'm open to that. I mean, if,
Tomas?
if,
Well, I think that would go towards the qualifications. So the one, proposal would be that all board members must be residents of the municipality and customers of PUB at the time of their appointment and during their terms of office, not hold any other city office or be an employee of the city, or conduct any business with PUB. Board members convicted of a felony shall be removed, and then the commissioners may suspend or remove from the office by the mayor by approval of the council.
Is there anything in there about multi-serving members where they serve on 3 or 4 or 5 different committees or 2 or 3? And should there be? I think there should be, but I don't know what y'all think. Can you have, one member sitting on 3 or 4 bodies of the city commission?
Well, that would be considered, board may not hold any city office or be an
Yeah.
employee of
Yeah,
the
but
city.
are they considered a city office?
And
If you're a board member for, I don't know, something else,
Yeah.
the landscaping committee or something, I don't know.
And that's the thing that we brought up a couple of meetings ago was if you're going to be on the PU board, you can't sit on any other board.
Well,
That
it
way
should,
it's all
but that should apply
But-
to any board.
legal. Coming up with the elections next year, there'll be 4 new board members to PUB. Or 4 new appointed board members, depending on who gets
Well, not
Voted in.
necessarily.
Yeah, are you
Not
talking
one.
about the city commission? Or are you talking about?
with the election of the city commission coming up next year.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily, yeah.
I mean, yeah, they can, I mean, if,
Has a term, and so they're staggered, and so they,
Right.
each year, each person gets to serve 4. So I think this year they only put in 1 new person. And next year, I think 2 or, next year might be,
there's 4 positions coming up.
could be.
So you were looking at 4 new
No,
board
no,
members if
because the
possible.
positions that are appointed don't run concurrently with the
Correct.
city
They're
commission.
It's staggered, that's right.
Election.
Okay.
That won't work.
So on that, I guess if a board member was removed and someone was replaced, it would just be.
The unexpired term.
Right.
Correct. The other one we want to talk about is, well, do we know what we're going to do with removals? I liked your idea. but-
The chair recognizes Mr.
Yeah,
Mendoza.
I think part of our discussion earlier was incremental change, right? Evolution, not revolution. So, yeah, I think with the supermajority, I think that's given some flexibility. And I would say, maybe 1 at will, one for cause, or both at will. But I would find it difficult to do more than 2 per year.
Yeah, I mean, even 2 per year. And so again, going back
Without
to
cause.
what voters have already, voted on in 2004, 2005. I'm not showing you this because I think that we need to just do exactly what has been done in the past or avoid doing what has been done in the past. I think it's more to put these things into context. And what our goal with the charter is to have a timeless document, timeless guidance that is not going to be, shaken by the current political winds, which is part of the reason that we want to shield PUB from political winds. And so if in 2005, voters said that they wanted to keep the one PUB member per year for removal. I think that tells us about, maybe the timelessness of that provision in the charter.
I'm not sure what all that meant, but I think that things have changed. Things have changed from 2005 to 2022 in terms of the optics with PUB, the board member appointments, the way the city commission, a lot of things have changed. I think if we put that agenda item on today, I think it would pass. Based on what.
It might,
Yeah,
it might.
I think it will, based on what's occurred.
Right, it would be reacting. Yes, exactly. I agree with
course.
you.
Most votes are reactionary, but again, we need to go back to the removal process. I mean, once we put that one to bed, I think we can go on. So your deal about removing two, would that be with cause or without cause?
I'm open to,
Either one?
yeah, I'm open to
I would-
either one.
If I may, I would suggest that if there is a major ethical or felonious act on the part of a PUB member, we should be able to, the city commission should be able to insist that that person either resign or be removed, which I guess would be for cause. But if that becomes an issue, then, I mean, if you discovered, God forbid, that everybody on the board was colluding over some criminal activity, that you'd want to be able to remove everybody.
Or if they move out of the district?
Yeah.
Or if they
And
move out
then
of.
don't voluntarily withdraw. But I think the original purpose for having only the one, I think is valid. If it reduces the chances that you'll have a wholesale political event that affects the PUB. But any member who has an ethical or criminal violation, the city commission should be able to remove for cause.
Can I speak to that real quick? I don't mean to interrupt again.
Correct me. I need it.
When it comes to like felonious acts, if you're going to do for cause, you have to take into consideration too that, are you talking about the allegation of something occurring, of course, or the conviction? Because conviction can take years.
Well, and that's where you can develop a consensus, and then we turn to somebody else and say, phrase this in such a way that it is productive and possible.
Yeah, but that,
Rather than, I mean, that's why we have these lawyers, is so that y'all can figure out how to draft the language.
that doesn't mean that, on the allegation, the commission could remove that one under indictment
Without cause.
without cause.
Correct.
Mr. Hinojosa? If I may, I serve too on foundations, and we all are required from time to time, actually every year, to sign a conflict of interest memo
Should already be in there.
to the president of the CEO of the organization. I think you should require that from every board member. I think that you should have a whistleblower, telephone number or email so that anybody from the public can dial in or email in and then direct those complaints or allegations to the internal auditor of PUB or internal auditor of the city. Close.
No, do you know, let me ask, does the city have an internal affairs department? Internal affairs, not an ethical committee or ethics committee. Do they have an internal affairs?
For staff, like Office of
this, yeah,
Inspector General? Or
Yeah.
I don't know if PUB does, but
Does PUB have one? Internal affairs. No, internal auditor is something different.
I think you're
Internal
talking
affairs is somebody that follows up on exactly what you said, on complaints of abuse or unethical behavior, self-dealing, not showing up to work and claiming they're at work, stuff like that.
Whether you define the internal affairs position like that, that's fine. But my thing is, whether you're convicted, whether you are being alleged of committing a crime, that takes time.
Yep.
But if you go to the city attorney, and the city attorney brings it to the city commission in executive session and says, here's the evidence.
Right, well, that's what I was trying to get at, what is cause?
Well, the cause should be at this, I mean, I don't need to have a court tell me he's guilty. I need to have the city attorney with more power to say, here's what you've done.
But that's not following due process.
Well, so,
I don't know if there's due process involved for an appointment for a PUB
Well,
board. I mean,
that's why I'm trying to define what cause is.
Cause is terminating an employee for a reason other than that you have to articulate. And so if they're not showing up, then you can terminate them. If they're not, if
Yeah, but these are not,
behavior within the
but
board, then you
again,
can terminate it. And it has to. be
these are not employees.
It'd be in the same context of what cause is. So if you're
Well,
looking at
if that's where we want to go, that's fine, but I'm just saying,
Removal at will.
I've suggested that, having the removal at will
But now you-
sometime back, and then there was some concern about having a mass exodus. But again, if you rely back on the five majority, super majority, it takes away, having a, renegade city commission getting rid of everybody.
I also suggest that you should define who the board members should be, at least at all times. You should have an engineer, you should have an
Okay,
attorney.
that was one of my recommendations
Have a
for
banker.
for the at-large positions. One of my suggestions was, having somebody on PUB that represents each district of the city commission.
in three
Then you
elements.
have 3 at-large,
Yeah.
and within those at-large positions, you should have a financial person. Noe, you want to move back to Brownsville? You can have a
Here.
CPA, you want to have an engineer, licensed engineer, somebody with a bachelor's degree at a minimum of some sort. Put some criteria for these at-large appointments.
At least have three. I mean, like you said.
Yeah,
whether it's a large-
those are 3 at-large, because then you have the whole population to draw from. When you're going to appoint somebody from a district, depending on where that district is, you may not have a professional engineer living in that particular district.
But you and I know, having served with many boards across, I mean, you heard the citizens say conflicts of interest. Conflicts of interest are hard to prove, but I don't need to prove something if I know I have allegations here and you confront that person in executive session, say, you know what? I have doubts that you're not going to meetings. Here's the evidence. And
Well, I would assume that the PUB members have to sign every time there's an item before that board that presents a conflict of interest. Don't they have to sign that conflict of interest statement, the CIQ?
so to be clear again, I'm sorry to interrupt. To be clear, they are subject, the PU board, right? I want to make clear that we're not talking about employees. Like for internal affairs, it would be HR for PUB under their personnel handbook. But for PUB members, the board members, if they violate something and it's filed with the Ethics Commission, then that is the board that would consider and make a recommendation, right? They are also subject to the requirement of filing a personal financial statement with
Right.
the city as well.
Right.
And so through that, that's where you can find out conflict of interest. So being subject to both having to file your personal financial statement and the Ethics Commission, which basically mirrors state law, right? So if there's a conflict, then yes, they would have to file an affidavit and abstain from voting on that matter.
Yeah, but you're assuming when you file these these personal financials, that they're being upfront and including all their businesses or whatever it is, right? Even though it's signed under perjury and all that stuff,
Sure,
but
yes.
you really
Yeah,
don't know.
Yeah, you could technically not fully disclose everything, but you would
Right.
hope they would.
Right. Hello, Marilyn.
Hi, I'm Marilyn Gilbert. I'm the interim general manager in COPB, and I've been sitting in the back here listening, and I was going back to our websites, and when you guys were talking about the whistleblower and everything, I know we have a fraud page. So I went back in there, and in there we have report fraud, to take action against fraud. And it says right here, just from our website right here, For the past 50 years, we at the Brownsville Public Utilities Board know that we have come to rely on us and deliver an outstanding customer experience. That is why we listen, and this is the concern with suspect of fraud. I don't have glasses right now. Waste and abuse of PUB resources. Point being is there's a phone number there that it calls, and I just asked the lady that was sitting next to me, and that happens to be on Tornado, I said, is that your number? And she said, yeah, it automatically goes to me. She reports to the board of directors. So when then somebody comes in and reports fraud, and she does get calls, she has a duty to then report to the board of directors. We also have on there, report to the Brownsville Public Utilities Board if you believe you need to be any type of scams or fraud. So we are being transparent when it comes to fraud and whistleblowers and independency, and it's against anything. Any one of our employees can pick up the phone, call independent. Administratively, she reports to myself right now, the general manager, but she doesn't report directly, she reports to the board of directors.
Now,
That is
what
your
happens if
question.
there's a board member that's accused of fraud?
And that is something that if it's one individual member, then of course, I would have to defer to her what she takes action on that.
And who do you report it to? Including the person that's being.
I'm sorry,
accused?
could you come to the podium?
Okay. Oh, it's all right. I mean, I heard.
Good evening. My name is Melida Pinales, and I'm the audit manager for PUB. And yes, sir, we have had that in the past. And until the investigation is complete, we have to do a thorough investigation, make sure that it's legit. And then I report it to the chair. At that point, I had to report it to the chair and of course to the general manager, and then take full action on what needs to be done. But yes, that person is excluded until the investigation is completed.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
So in my short interim, I have had somebody report fraud to me, and the first thing, it was when the customer service came. And the first thing I did, you need to go into internal audit, follow the process, and at that point, they follow the chain of command to where they need. At that point, that agency was then reported that information, and then they are the ones that are going to either take action, review, and anything. And we keep it confidential who it is that we're reporting or anything like that from those individuals and everything there. Any questions about whistleblowers and fraud or anything? We do have a policy in place as well, and I can probably look back and look into some of that as well and give you copies of these websites.
I could just ask, I know the answer, I'm pretty sure, but what does the form look like when the city commission appoints a board member? What do they sign that reveals to you any potential conflict or agrees to what they're going to do?
So I just recently rejoined back the utility about 6 months ago, and I had the experience of a new appointee that came in. So that individual came in, and when he came, he took his oath of office, like anybody else that comes into and works. Like I just recently got, and we all take a sworn oath of office as well. We are public officers because we are all, public employees. We are part of the, like anybody else at the city, we are public. So the form that comes in, they sign the form. They do have the ethics, information. They do file with the city, the new ethics requirements that are there. So everything was done there. During the orientation, that information is taken care of by our board secretary, which in this case happens to be the secretary assigned to the general manager. And so she's the one who read and notarized all of the various different forms. So I think we can contact her, and if any of those forms or a public record can be provided to any of you who has signed them. And I imagine we have a passport. I'm sure there was the same process 6 or 7 years ago when you came in, took an office, and then you signed. Yes. So the
That would be
process hasn't
useful.
really changed much there, but it is in place.
Yes. So you were at PUB in 2005? Is that?
I started at the Brownsville Public Utilities Board, and maybe I should give you a little bit of my background. Some of you know me because I've served actually in several different boards or different things in the past and part of this community. So I was at the Brownsville Public Utilities Board from the year 2000 to 2014. From there, I went to New York for 5 years. I was at the Long Island Power Authority, and then from there on to Imperial Irrigation Districts for about 3 years there. So about 7.5 years I spent away from the utility. Prior to that, I worked as an engineer. In my background, I have an MBA. I have from the University of Texas, an architectural engineering degree, and I've been in public service my entire career pretty much.
Thank you. So I have another question for you, and maybe nobody has an answer right now, but an answer could come to us at the next meeting. So the amendment that was, one of the amendment that was approved by voters in 2005 read as follows. It would change certain requirements for PUB board members to remain in good standing on the board, including absences and not having any outstanding debt to the city other than tax debt. It eliminates the requirement that PUB board members must own property within the city. And from our conversation right now, about like being able to remove board members from absences and, or not being in good standing. So it sounds like this is, should already be part of the charter, but, it may not be done in practice. And I would like to maybe get some information on how it actually is done in practice.
I will look into the information how it's done in practice, but I have seen in the past, because I mentioned, and some have been through several different administrations where during some of the administrations, we couldn't get quorums, so we couldn't meet. And because we couldn't meet, then there were certain things that they halted the operations of the business because we couldn't continue certain services. Obviously, our number one goal is to provide electric, reliable power, as well as water and sewer services. And so those continuity of services is part of the things, so those prevail under emergency management. So we enacted some of those provisions when we weren't able to get some of our things approved. To the answer to the question, in 2005, and what are the board members' ethics, I do recall an instance where an ex-mayor or ex-officio who sat on a board sued another board member in respect because they had some money that was owed to the city, because that's one of the things that is looked into to ensure that there is current practices there. I'm sure if you can Google it, you'll find it.
Question, Mayor. Whatever the internal auditor gets, like a complaint on fraud or whatever, does that get reported to anyone at the city commission or city hall?
I'm not familiar with her process enough to know exactly.
You could just nod your head. I mean, yes or no? Okay. So either it does or you don't know if it does. You report it to this city attorney and say, okay. So it stays over there. That's more than a head nod, but okay.
Okay, that's okay. I've been in this capacity for 12 years, of course, as as an auditor one, and then eventually as a manager. But no, sir, I have, even the previous manager has never reported to the city commission.
I have a question for you
Just to
before you leave.
differentiate there, if, for instance, an employee had this issue, it certainly would never be elevated to the city commission level. But if a PUB board member had that, what would then happen? If the process determined that there was an ethical violation on the part of a board member, what would happen after that?
It gets reported to the PUB board, and then they make the decision.
Okay,
I'll issue out a report, and then
yeah,
it's up to them.
but
what
it's not
decision they
public
wanna make.
record either.
I'm sorry?
It wouldn't have been public record?
No,
No.
I wouldn't think so.
Unlikely.
Once a report is finalized and issued out, any report can become an open record.
Before you leave, I have a quick question. Sorry.
It's okay, sir.
When you have these incidents come before you, are you the last person to see it come to completion? Or after it's out of your hands, is one of those where, well, I've done my due diligence to get it to here. After that, it's up to them. Or do they come back to you and tell you, hey, by the way, this has been completed and this was the outcome?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that come in that are not directly related to what I do. So I'll forward it, let's say, to human resources. And then, yes, I expect a follow-up on what action has been taken and make sure I put closure to that report that came in.
To answer your questions, and even for my past tenure here, is fraud is, when it's reported, it is investigated and action is taken, and whatever action that may be, sometimes if it's on employees, leads up to termination.
Is there any further discussion on?
I don't know if we ever resolved the removal process.
And
I think
my
The
apologies for
appointment
interrupting.
process is good. I'm good with a supermajority for the appointment.
Yeah.
But on the removal process, I think it should stay supermajority to remove at will. No one else has come up with anything other than maybe one or two for cause.
I, for one, going to stick with, I think just the outright removal without any explanation of a board member, I prefer that it be by supermajority.
Right, I agree with that.
If there is a member of the PUB, which certainly there is not right now, who deserves to be removed for some ethical or criminal reason, I know that's not the case today, but if that ever came up, then you should be able to remove. And if you determine that there was collusion among board members, they should, that whatever it is, if there's two of them or three of them, the city commission should be able to.
Yeah, the
remove
problem with that is you may not find out for 18 months to 2 years after the fact.
Exactly correct. But that is just something that I'm willing to accept in exchange for the less likelihood of just a political rally. I mean, for my money, what I would prefer is not to change the at-will release, but to add the provision that if there is a ethical or criminal set of circumstances that merit the dismissal of that board member, that be allowed.
Is it appropriate to make motions right now?
No,
No, we just discuss it.
No.
We do it later.
But we
Right-
can-
Right away, man. No, come on, guys.
we can go to items for consideration, because a lot of the discussion that you're all having, it sounds like would the motions made and maybe seconded and voted might kind of,
Okay, well, can you do this for the next meeting, as one of the action items? And it'd be two different items, so we can vote on them separately.
yeah, we have action items on the agenda.
And we're coming close to the end.
Yes.
Does number 3, would that qualify for that on this
I
one?
would think number one.
I think that'd be more specific.
So we can go through each item,
Yes.
but I believe what you would like to do would be, if you're going to modify, would be under number 3.
Okay?
So Chair, are you ready to move on to items for consideration? Okay. Would you read them?
Yes. Item number 1, consideration, discussion and action, if any, to repeal CRC's past recommendation to require a supermajority as opposed to unanimous vote to remove PUB board members.
Now, the reason this came up was because after the meeting, I was approached as to whether this, like, we were not clear as to whether it was, 12 months, or it could be, like, one member in 12 months, or it could be just all members at once. And so then that needs clarification.
Well, on this particular one, we've discussed it, that we don't want to go in that direction. So we could pass it if it would have said to approve PUB board members versus remove.
So at this time, we would need a motion and a second, and if there's no second, then it fails.
How
If
about
there is a
would you
second,
agree to table it? Because we've talked about, they don't want to go down this path about a supermajority to remove. Is that correct?
Well, my understanding is the vote last time was we were just changing the definition for the supermajority rather than unanimous vote.
Yeah, but
But
this says
the-
to remove.
But the one person and within the 12 months remained the same, and that would still be up for discussion in the future.
Right, but I'm
as for
talking
right
about
now,
this
I
one
think the
specifically.
supermajority is.
About this one specifically, the way it's worded, I mean, I'll
Th-
go,
This this is not to appoint.
no,
right,
right,
like,
it's to remove. So
this-
I'd like to make a motion to table that item.
There's a motion to table. Ayes?
Aye.
Those opposed? Let's table it.
Item number 2, consideration, discussion, and action, if any, to recommend to change, no changes be made to City of Brownsville Charter Article 6.
And this would be in, not considering the ones that we have already voted on, but it would be any others.
I don't understand this. this one.
Are you suggesting we leave the charter as is?
Based on the bond rating agencies. And this, again, this can be tabled. Is more about not considering, with all the information that we received today about how our actions can impact PUB's bottom line and its ability to borrow money, we need to be really careful
I move to
about how we
table.
proceed. We can table it too.
There's
Yeah.
a motion to table.
to
Is there a
table.
second? There's a second by Mr. We're gonna go ahead and table that one also.
Aye.
Yeah, I'm sorry, there's a vote.
Oh,
Table.
Yeah, to table. A vote to table. A vote to table.
Unanimous.
Say aye.
Aye?
Aye. Those opposed? Ayes have it.
Item number 3, consideration, discussion, and action, if any, related to proposed amendments to Brownsville Charter.
I'd like to make a motion that we, again, this got to go to the city commission for approval, that we require a supermajority to appoint PUB board members. To be appointed by the city commission as a body.
We have a motion on the table.
Wasn't that voted on last?
Yeah,
time?
We voted on that
yeah,
last
we
time.
voted that on
Yeah.
last time.
I'm trying to get to the
I
item.
wasn't here, but I
don't
watched the
think so.
video.
I don't think so. Or else we wouldn't be talking about it. If it was approved last time, that's fine, but we spent 30 minutes talking about it, so I thought there was some confusion.
No, we approved it.
Okay, all right. Well, then I take it back. Sorry. Well, I'm going to flesh everybody out. I'd like to make a motion to require a supermajority vote to remove any PUB board member for or without cause.
So for
That's the same.
clarification, it was passed for supermajority. Are you now modifying that to include with or without cause?
But we haven't talked about the with or without cause. I've been asking what cause is.
Yeah, so my understanding is we replace unanimous vote with supermajority of the entire city commission. So that would be
That was for the removal?
for the removal.
Last week.
Okay, that's fine.
So the two actions today, just to clarify on number 1, was to undo what the board approved last week.
Well, that item was tabled.
That item was tabled.
Correct.
Correct. So right now, the motion that was approved last week still stands, which is replace majority of the city commission to supermajority for appointments, and then
Right.
replace unanimous vote with supermajority of the entire city commission
For removal.
Right.
for removal.
Okay, that's fine.
Right, in the
We
12
talked
months.
about it
if
In
the
the 12
board
months.
wants to.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
I'll make that motion if you need it, or
Well, no
don't
motion is
have it.
needed. If we're gonna leave it
Okay,
as
well then-
is,
if we already did it last week, then why don't we spend the last 40 minutes talking about it?
No,
About
I think the
removal.
the clarification here is that they replaced the term majority of the city commission to supermajority, but
Right.
nothing else in that provision was changed. And so then, I guess, right, you're asking whether
the reason why we had the last
Just come-
2-hour discussion
Right.
is because there was a few members of your committee that wanted it on the agenda to revoke those changes or that recommendation.
Right, so last week, if we voted, see that, why did we have the discussion about limiting the number of PUB board members to remove? That's what I'm asking. Why do we have all this discussion?
Because
if we already
our
approved it last
discussion,
week?
our vote before did not impact the
Right.
number of people who could be removed in a period of time. It only changed the terms of the city commission's actions, not the number that.
Okay, so then with this motion, then what is it doing?
So your motion was, you can modify it. If you want to increase the number of individuals to be removed in the 12-month period, then you would modify your motion to include that, whether it's 2, 3, et cetera.
Well, I didn't put a number on it, but my motion would include that would have no limit as to how many they could remove at any given time by a supermajority.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Well, that's the motion that I meant.
I'd like
Because there
to,
was so much discussion about it that, I was confused with what everybody's talking about.
So you want to be able to remove, have
Yeah,
the ability to remove
with a
all
supermajority,
members?
you can remove 1 or all 7 with a supermajority. 5 affirmative votes.
So you have a motion on the table?
That's my motion.
Chair? You would need a second.
We have a motion on by Mr. Cascos. Do we have a second?
So that motion fails for not being seconded?
Um,
I would like to propose or offer a motion that the city commission be, that the wording would be such that the city commission could remove any or all members of the PUB for cause. And we'll have to spend, there'll have to be some time spent on what is for cause. I agree that it can be an open term. But at the very least, it would include ethical violations, failure to fully report their potential conflicts, and/or criminal activity.
Would you require a supermajority for that as well?
Yes,
Okay,
indeed.
I'm okay. I'll second that. I'm okay with that.
Yeah. There's a motion and a second, which
All in favor?
Can you repeat
All in
the
favor?
motion?
Yeah, in my case, not understanding cause, I'm hesitant to,
but
to
he,
support that.
well-
But I understand the essence of it.
Yeah.
And to a certain extent, I would agree, but I don't know what cause is.
but he's also stating ethical, any ethics violations that may like say.
Then who makes that determination?
Yes, it's fuzzy, but I agree in principle, but I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
think
so-
it can be.
So, I
And
mean,
that's why we have counsel,
Yeah.
so that we can refine it to the extent possible. And certainly the city commission will want it refined as well. So I'm not objecting to improving. I'm sure it can be improved in terms of its language. I just think the way to do that is through thorough research by the appropriate persons.
Can we come back to this one once we have more information on what it could actually look like?
Well, I don't think, and you can ask the city attorney, I don't know if you're going to find a finite definition of cause anywhere. Because there's going to be so many reasons for cause that are, that we don't even know, or, we can't even discuss or anticipate. And so that's why you have such a broad definition, because it allows a little bit more leeway for the commissioners to be able to take action, so long as they're able to articulate a reason for removing a board member, as opposed to just, we don't like the individual.
Yeah, but I think, David, at a minimum, you mentioned examples of the cause.
Right. And
At a
Mr.
minimum.
Chairman, I'm also willing to ask, if we wanted to table that while we were considering the more specific language, that wouldn't bother me either.
Well, why don't we approve it subject to coming back and maybe coming up with a clearer definition of what cause is?
Well, what I was going to recommend is if, of course, it's your motion, right? I don't believe there's been a second, but we're meeting next week. We could come back with what for cause
Right.
normally defined, and maybe some verbiage that then you guys can move
Debate.
forward on.
So we can approve it right now, subject to you coming back next week with a definition
Of cause.
of causes.
I'd rather just wait until
Yeah.
we get the information and then, make
Yeah,
a
because if it comes
determination.
back and we don't like it, we can always reverse it. We're approving it subject to him coming back with some definitions of potential causes.
Miguel, a motion to table is appropriate.
Yeah.
If you make a motion to table it, the motion stays on the floor, but we can table it.
Yeah, there's still a motion on the floor, so I don't know if it's been seconded.
I had seconded,
Seconded,
but
okay.
I'll withdraw my
All in
second.
favor?
Okay.
Yeah.
And then,
I'll make a motion to table.
I
That
second that
motion?
motion.
okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay.
I think, if I may, what that does is give you an opportunity to research what might be a suitable definition.
Correct. And
And
then,
it still leaves it on the agenda for the next meeting.
correct. And it'll allow us to put it on the board so everybody can see it.
Right.
And they know what
Right,
they're voting
right. And I think several of us, agreed on it on principle. But
Refine it.
right,
That's fine.
so, I mean, it could work. One of my questions would be, are city commissioners, also, are there like such restrictions that a city commissioner could be removed, for example, like for,
I'll tell you the charter speaks to that, but I won't go further because it's not on the agenda.
thank you.
When's our public meeting?
It is December 8th, which is, December 7th. I'm sorry. I have my next one. Yeah.
I would add just to to being able to remove is that the commission will be able to suspend, as well, based on the
The next agenda?
Yeah, so the question is, we're on whether future agenda items. So at this time, are you asking for us to,
Majority, for cause.
okay. Are there any other future agenda items requested?
From the 2005 election. Because there may already be language to this.
Any other? That's it, okay.
Move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? We can stay longer.
Hey,
And thank you all invited.
30 on Thursday at the event center? Okay. So it's the 7th.